All right, we'll go ahead and get started here. My name is Terry Harlan. I was a teacher and for over 20 years and an administrator for one of those years. I've taught middle school, high school, a little bit of graduate school at Georgia State, and taught private schools and public schools. And just a few years ago, I started to get very disappointed with all the test prep programs that were out there because they usually fell into one of two categories. You had these brilliant test takers who often were right out of college, sometimes the Ivy Leagues and other places like that, really knew how to take the test, but didn't know how to explain it to kids. Or you had these programs that were put in schools, and you had teachers who were teaching kind of beyond what their subject matter was, and really couldn't answer all the questions that students had. And so that that kind of sparked me to start my own research into SAT prep, and I'd actually taken the test a couple of times. I was at Chaparral High School in Parker, Colorado, and I was the oldest kid in the room twice. Um, but scored in the 99th percentile. And with all the pedagogical skills I've had throughout the years teaching, I decided to put that together into a formula to show kids how to do better on the SAT. So anyway, I appreciate you guys being on the call. I know we've got some students, some parents, some counselors and teachers on here, and hopefully there'll be more joining us. I had a slew of people sign up, so I'm expecting a pretty good turnout. But regardless, we won't wait for them. We'll go ahead and get started. And let's see here if you can. I'm so bad at technology sometimes, so you guys got to bear with me. Um, can everybody, let's see. Okay, can everybody see the PowerPoint? Give me a yes if you can, because I'm right
Yes.
now can't see the chat. Excellent. Good, good, good. Okay, so a little bit about the digital SAT. What most people wanted to find out about was um, test taking strategies and tips and how to do better on the SAT. So we're going to spend probably quite a bit of time on that today, but there are some other things that we need to get through. So I'm going to try to rush through those pretty quickly if I can. Um, so the SAT now has changed quite a bit. If anyone has taken the paper SAT recently, um, you see that the reading and writing section is much smaller. There are two modules with 27 questions each. Two of those questions in each of the modules are experimental, so that means that don't count toward your score, but you don't know which ones they are. So you got to treat them all the same. As opposed to the old SAT and the ACT, there are no more long passages. It's all short passages with one question each. There's a much greater emphasis on this SAT on vocabulary than on the past one. It kind of harkens back to ones from many years ago. Um, there are more questions around transitions, and there's poetry on the SAT on this particular SAT. So it's a bit different. Of course, it's all done online, and I'll talk a little bit more about the tools that you have for that in a second. The math section's really almost as long as in terms of time as the previous math section, but there are a lot fewer questions. Now, don't let that fool you. There are 33 multiple choice, 11 free response questions. One of the differences is that the math is a little harder on the hardest questions. So there's more complex algebra, for instance. Now, there's no question sets anymore. There's no imaginary sets, imaginary and complex number questions anymore, but there's more geometry, about the same amount of trigonometry, maybe even a little bit less. But there's kids are really struggling so far with the algebra and some of the problem solving questions. So that's a little bit different. If you want my personal assessment, I think that the new SAT, the English is easier, but the math is harder. Now, that being said, if you have a weak vocabulary, then the English section might be a little more difficult for you than the previous SAT. Anyway, it's quasi-adaptive. What that means is that every question doesn't determine the next question you'll take, but how you perform on the first of two modules in each section does. So remember, there's two sections. There's English and math. So if you don't do so hot on the first module, you'll get put into module 2A, which means that the highest score you could possibly make on that section out of 800 is really a 600. If you do well enough, then you'll move on to module 2, and that gets you up to a perfect score or the highest score. By the way, 800 doesn't mean perfect. It just means that you're at the highest percentile possible. So you could theoretically, and on the past SAT, it was definitely not theoretical. People would miss questions and still get an 800 on a particular section. So we'll see how that works out for this SAT. Some of the features on this one are that you can mark questions to review them later. There's a built-in timer, so you don't have to worry about that analog clock on the wall that you're looking at from a different angle. There's a built-in graphing calculator, although you can bring your own. And you can use calculators on every question in the math section, every question. And, some kids are like, well, this feels like cheating. Maybe, but they're allowing it. So go for it. If you need to graph something on your calculator, if you need to use the graph to figure out the answers, go for it. If you can use it, you can get it. There's a reference sheet just like the one that was on the old SAT, same items. You can annotate. So that means you can write little things in on or type things in. It's a little clumsy and it's a little difficult. And I would definitely ask students to go ahead and play around with this whole blue book on the SAT. We'll get to that a bit later, but to definitely play around with it so you get comfortable with it. And there's an option eliminator as well, so that you can say, I don't want this, I don't want to do this one, I don't want to do this one. Okay, so now let's talk about what test optional means. That means that you get to choose whether you submit your scores. Now, there's some colleges since COVID that have gone test blind, and this is a pretty comprehensive list out of the about 1,700 or so four-year colleges that are out there. These are the colleges that are test blind, means they don't even want you to talk about your scores. Okay. Notice that a lot of them are in California. We got 16 colleges under Cal State, University of California's 8 colleges. But the only ones that have promised to continue to be test blind are the ones with asterisks beside them. And there's only 6 of those. So any of these at any time could go back to being test optional. Who knows? I know that a lot of colleges are struggling now with how to let a kid in. There was a whole study done on Vanderbilt about the troubles that Vanderbilt was having. So it could change. Now, test optional. Okay, is it a real thing? Do I really not need to submit my score? Well, let's talk about that for a little bit. The test, what has been found is that of those colleges that are test optional, and in 2021, the MIT rate, which means the rate of students being admitted to a particular college, was sometimes twice as high if you gave them your test score than if you didn't. Okay, now we don't know all the other characteristics that the students had, but here's some examples. For Emory, 17% of students who submitted with their tests got in, where only 8.6, about half, without got in. Colgate was a similar story. Georgia Tech, more than double who submitted their scores got in. And Vanderbilt, doesn't seem like a big difference there, but they really struggled with trying to use this holistic process. So a lot of schools are going back now to requiring the test. And you see some of the things that Harvard, Yale, MIT, Duke admissions say about taking the test, about how the SATs are actually pretty valuable in predicting how students will do, particularly in the first year of college. And Yale has been very adamant about this. In fact, one interesting thing they said, that if you don't submit your test scores, they're going to assume that your scores are lower than average. So what you may have read, what you might have heard, is that not submitting your test scores is not going to penalize you. Well, it might. And if everything else isn't strong on your application, it could certainly make a big difference. Auburn's an interesting university. Now they call themselves test preferred. And what does that mean? They only look at 4 factors to decide if a student gets in. And I had a hard time believing this, so I called them this week, and sure enough, they said, yeah, that's it. That's all we look at. We don't look at college essays. We don't look at extracurricular activities or volunteerism or any of that stuff. They look at 2 important factors, which is GPA and test scores. They look at how hard the rigor, how hard your classes are, and they look at whether you live in the state of Alabama. And those are the 4 factors they use to determine if a student gets in. Well, if one of those 2 factors is missing, then everything else has to be pretty high. The GPA has to be pretty high. The rigor has to be pretty high. And in fact, if your GPA is less than a 3.6 on a 4.0 scale, they're not even going to consider you at all without a test score. Okay. So I don't know how many other colleges fall into this category, but at least Auburn does. And it's kind of unusual. And because they call themselves test optional. Now, here are a few, and again, this is not a comprehensive list, but a few of the test optional colleges where testing is considered very important. Okay, so there seems to be a contradiction there. If it's very important, why would they say, you can give us the scores or not? Well, again, some of these fall into those categories of colleges where they're giving admittance to a lot more students who are submitting their scores. And you look at Kennesaw. Okay, so Kennesaw, I'll explain what these numbers mean. Kennesaw only looks at 2 things, GPA and test scores. They don't look at how hard your courses were. They don't look at extracurricular. None of that is even considered. So there's these 2 important things. So if you don't give them a test score, then your grades have to be excellent. Okay, excellent grades. And by the way, take a look at some of these middle 50% scores. What this means, the lower number is the 25th percentile. What that means, and these are of students that got in. These aren't of who applied. These are the ones who got in. That means that NYU, the first one here, that if you scored a 1470, you did better than 25% of the other people who got admitted. Only 25%. That's amazing. And if you scored a 1560, that means that 25% of the students did better than you. Okay, these are astronomical numbers from when I was in college, right? I mean, these are just crazy numbers. So it's a lot harder now to get in. And by the way, I just wanted to pause for a second and thank everybody for coming. I said that you would get a particular little prize here if you showed up. And one of the things that you'll get is a 20-minute free session with me. Here is the sign up a link if you want to take a picture of it, although I'm going to send it in an email to everybody anyway. But in that 20 minutes, you can talk about anything from the SAT to how to get into college. What I try to do with students, because I'm also a college consultant now, is I use try to find that hook, try to find that angle that makes that student unique, and show that student how to present that in applications and through essays and all that kind of stuff. So that's a little plug about that. That's all I wanted to say there. Okay, another reason still to take the SAT are scholarships. And these are some scholarships that require at least a 1400. Some of these require 1500 or more to even be eligible for the scholarship. And this is, again, just a partial list. Another partial list of the scores from 400 to 1,000. Okay, so what does that mean? That means that some of these scholarships, you just have to take the SAT. You don't have to score well. You just have to take it in order to qualify for the scholarship. All right. So as I said before, some colleges are going back to requiring the SAT. Here are some of them. This is, again, far from a comprehensive list. But notice a lot of Southern schools, the U.S. military academies are on there. There's a lot of schools in Florida, Georgia, and LSU that also require the SAT now. And notice Dartmouth and Yale. Yale, as of today, announced that it's going to require the SAT again. So it's kind of bucking in the faces of some of the other Ivy Leagues, but we're seeing that they're having too hard of a time making holistic judgments without the SAT. So it becomes pretty important. Just wanted to share this with you really quickly. University of Georgia, I'm not sure why I should have put some more colleges on here, but I've got two: University of Georgia and then UPenn, which is an Ivy League. This was their middle. This is their 50th middle 50th percentile for students this year so far that have been admitted through early admission or early decision. And for UPenn, you'd expect it to be high, 1460 to 1560. But look at what it is for Georgia's out-of-state students, OOS, 1370 to 1500. That's something else. That's incredible. For in-state students, it's 1340. That's, used to be Ivy League stuff. Now, when you see these numbers, this makes you think, well, is everybody scoring high? And the answer is no, they're not. Here are the selected percentiles up to 2024. And I forgot I lost the labels here, but the middle is reading and writing, and the right one is math. And so let's say you took that 25th percentile score for Georgia, which is a 1340. And you broke that in half. Let's say half 670 in the math, 670 in the reading. Well, if we look at here, that would be like an 87th percentile in English and about an 88th percentile in math, right? So that you did better than all of those students. And yet it's only the 25th percentile for the University of Georgia. So, the more popular and top and elite colleges, their numbers are getting so much higher. It's incredible. Okay, well, so what do you do about it? Well, first of all, you register, okay? And very quickly, you just need to go onto the College Board website and create an account if you don't already have one. If you do have one, it's easy to find how to register for the SAT. It's pretty self-explanatory. What is a little confusing is the Blue Book. And by the way, you can still register for the March, May, and June tests this year for the SAT. You will want to practice with the digital practice test. There's 4 digital practice tests on College Board. And if I'm going to go to the College Board website now, show you what that looks like. And so you get to this site, you want to scroll down, find Blue Book Digital Testing, click on it, and then download Blue Book now. And then you got to check your device requirements, and then you got to hit that again. And then you're ready to download it. Okay. And for Apple, it's a little bit, it's about the same process, but it's a little, something else. So, the thing about using the College Board, and I recommend, and can everybody see the PowerPoint again? I don't know where if it's
it's there.
It's there. Good, excellent. Okay, so you can prepare for the SAT using College Board and Khan Academy. And this book right here that's on the screen, this is the digital SAT book for this year. Only has 4 practice tests in here. The 4 practice tests can be found online, or basically they are the practice tests that the Blue Book uses on the College Board website. Okay, so now if you move to the second module, the hard module on all of them, then you'll miss some questions that you wouldn't have a chance to practice with. Those are in here. So the easy module, the easy second module for English and math for all four of those tests is in this book. Is in this book right here. So but in this book has a few little things in there that are, I think, helpful too. So it's not a bad thing to have. But let me talk a little bit about trying to use the College Board and Khan Academy for preparation. Okay, so I mentioned that everything in the book's online. The best questions to practice with are the ones from the College Board and Khan Academy, not Princeton Review, not Barron's. And the reason for that is because the people who write the Khan Academy questions are from the College Board. Okay. And the College Board and Khan Academy, they give adequate explanations for every SAT concept. Now, I have to say that I'm not sure if that's entirely true still. I wrote this part of the PowerPoint with the last SAT, and it was true then. I'm not sure that they give great explanations for everything. What they do, however, is give long explanations for solving problems, especially in the math. They don't want you taking shortcuts. Now, there's reasons for that I can go over later, but they really don't want everybody scoring exceedingly well because it cheapens the test. So they give long explanations for solving problems, which are not going to help you get faster. They don't give you any shortcuts or tricks. Okay. And they are also not very good for producing strategies. Now I do that with my students. I give them shortcuts and tricks and helps them with strategies, and really it's been a blessing with the change of this SAT. I think it's a lot easier to work with than the old one. And they don't always have very good explanations for wrong answers. So you get a wrong answer, you're not sure why you got it wrong, even after you read their explanations. So you have to go beyond College Board and Khan Academy, but I would use their questions exclusively if you can. Okay, so how do you get a high score? Well, I'm going to give you some general tips, and some of you aren't going to like a few of these, but the number one tip for improving your English scores to read a lot. Read both fiction and nonfiction. That is going to increase your vocabulary. It's going to increase your understanding of the English language. So you can much more easily say, well, this one doesn't sound right. I know this isn't right, or I know you can't do this. You can't put a verb here or whatever. Reading a lot is key, and reading books that are at the college level. Okay. So that's number one. Number two is building your vocabulary. And flashcards is a great way of building it. Anytime in any book that you're reading, in or outside of practice for the SAT, that you find vocabulary you don't know, I would make a note of it and I would learn it. Okay. Learn what types of English questions there are. There aren't that many. So compared to the previous SAT, where there were tons of different types of questions, if you wanted to categorize them, here, there are really only about 9 or 10 different questions in the English section. Okay. And you can use the College Board questions from SAT to practice those. There's also a College Board test bank, which I'm going to share with you guys too, so you can pull up these questions anytime. There's over almost 2,000 questions on there. A lot of them repeat though from the test. So that's the one thing I don't like about it. Learn the type of math questions there are and practice them. Okay, so there are a greater number of math question types on the SAT than there are English question types. That's a kind of a change from the last SAT, but it's a finite number. So once you've done it a lot, you can start to see the patterns. And these are some of the things I teach my students, to see these patterns, to look for these patterns, so that you're like, oh, okay, this is not a brand new question. This is not some strange thing. They test the same concepts over and over and over. They just do them in different ways. Learn the formulas and how to use them well in math. There are about 10 formulas, and that's it that you really have to know. There's a ton of formulas in math, but there are only 10 that the SAT is going to question you on. And so once you learn those, then you're good to go. Learn the other skills about test taking. Okay. And I always talk about those things with my students. And then the reference sheet that's given for geometry, learn how to use all of those formulas. That's very important because there'll be at least one or two questions in the math that refer back to those formulas. Not many, but one or two. And if you're shooting for that really high score, then that's you're gonna want those. Um, use the College Board practice tests. So there's 8 right now. There's 4 that are digital that you can use with your blue book. Okay. And then there are 4 more that are linear tests. Basically, they're just PDFs on the website, and you can download those and work on those on your own. You can't do anything with the blue book on those. And in fact, they have a few extra questions on there too. So, but that's what those are the tests that I would use. Use Khan Academy to drill on certain concepts. So if you can't identify it, then somebody else might be able to identify for you what it is that you're missing and say, okay, you need to do sets of practice of these on Khan Academy. Learn how to back solve in math, and that's something that's a special trick that I talk about. I'll talk about some of that today. What exactly that means. Um, learn when to substitute numbers. So if you've got multiple variables, sometimes just by plugging in small numbers, you can get to the answer easier like that. Learn the trick sheet section. So there's a reading section. So within each English module, there's reading, which are the first half, basically, more or less, a little more than half. And then the second part is all gums, which is grammar, usage, mechanics, and spelling or style, depending on what level of teaching you're at. So, and then so if you learn the tricks for each section, then it becomes a lot faster to take the test. And here's one of the things that I emphasize with my students. First, you got to get good before you get fast. Okay. But part of the strategy that I employ with all my students is that we get as fast as we possibly can with the questions that are easy. And that way it gives you more time to think about those questions that are harder. So it's not like, okay, I know how to do this question, let me move on. It's okay, I know how to do this question. It took me 45 seconds. Can I get it down to 20 seconds? All right. And you do that 15 times, that makes a huge difference. So that's part of what we look at. Learn the right pacing strategy. This is going to be very, very important for both for keeping calm and for actually finishing the test within time and having time to look over answer choices. So, so those are the main general tips. Now let's get into what is important to keep in mind about the SAT. Well, the SAT all it does is test basic concepts. Okay, there's no advanced trigonometry in here. There's no calculus on here, but it tests them in weird but ultimately predictable, repetitive ways. The SAT is also obsessed with details, so things that you might get away with on an essay for your English teacher, you don't get away with on the SAT. This is a very important concept that I think once students really grab onto this concept, they start doing better in the English section. And that is that each multiple choice question has only one answer. Okay, so even if it says what's the best answer or what's what's most likely the most likely possibility here, forget that wording. Okay, because what it makes it sound like is that, well, if the right answer weren't on here, then there'd be another right answer, and that's just not the case. The case is that every wrong answer can be eliminated. Okay, and somewhere the reason I think that people well, let me say that not understanding this principle will allow you to get down to 2 answer choices and say, well, they both sound right to me. I guess I'll just guess. Instead of getting down to two answer choices and saying, okay, I need to be either able to eliminate one or to favor another one. Now, how do I do that? And that takes away sort of the subjectivity and that's in the back of your mind that happens when you raise your hand in class and fight for points and the teacher gives it to you. So that doesn't happen on the SAT. We can learn to look for those indisputable objective answers, and that's something that I show kids and work with. Okay, so let's take a look at specifically some SAT questions. Let me pull up. Let me pull something up here. Okay. Um, and can everybody see the numbers with there should be a blue circle around number 25. Can everybody see that?
Yes, we could see it.
Awesome. Okay. So let's go through some English stuff and then we're going to go through some math and then I'll take your questions and we'll call it a night. So, well, also I appreciate everybody being here. I want to talk about some of the free bonus stuff that you guys are going to get just for being here. So I appreciate that. Let's look at question number 1. So the first few questions here are what are called words in context. Okay, so call them vocabulary if you wish, but the trick is here we start with the sentence. And by the way, I want you guys who are taking the SAT to memorize these questions so they become so comfortable in your mind that you don't have to read them when you see them. Okay, now that's not the case with math. Math is different, but with the English, they repeat the same questions over and over. So get to where you don't have to read them. That's a waste of time. You just see them and you look at the problem, you know what kind of problem you have here. Now, looking for the choice that completes the text with the most logical and precise word or phrase. So what I want to do is read the sentence that has the blank in it. Expecting to see continued growth, some analysts blank that revenues will more than double by 2028. Now, I don't want to look at my answer choices. I want to try to think of an answer in my head. Expecting to see, that means that either I'm hopeful or I'm predicting something. Some analysts blank that revenues will more than double. Well, what comes into mind me is forecast or predict. So let's see if that's one of the answers. And sure enough, it's D. Okay. Notice I did not read any of this. It wasn't necessary. Sometimes it will be. Okay. So the rule is we read only what we need to read. But if we need to go beyond what we just read, then we do that. Okay. So again, think of it in your head without plugging in all the answer choices and seeing which one fits best. That's not the way to do it. It's to come up with the answer in your head, then look here. And even if you don't get the exact word, you might find a synonym for it, or at least your brain is thinking in the right direction so that you're able to eliminate some wrong answers. Okay, let's look at number 2 here. Marquita del Carpio Landry and her colleagues have shown that it may be possible to blank this problem by transmuting molecules through carbon nanotubes, which can cross cell walls. It may be better to blank this problem. Well, what do you do with problems? And it sounds like it's offering a solution. So I'm thinking solve. It may be possible to solve this problem. That's what comes to mind here. So let me look at the answer choices. A, conceptualize. Now, I might not know what that word means. So I'm going to just keep it for a bit. I'm not going to get rid of it. Neglect. It may be possible to neglect this problem by, well, that's not neglecting. It's not the same as solving. So that's out. Illustrate this problem. No. Overcome this problem. Okay. that's not the same thing as solve, but it's along the same lines. It's getting past that problem. So, and now let me compare it back to A. I don't know what A means, so this has to be the answer choice. Okay. Now I do know what A means. And if you don't, then these are the words that you want to create flashcards for and keep them. And you may have 1,000 flashcards by the time you take the SAT. That's okay. But it'll help you not just in on the SAT, but it'll help you in other things as well. So um, let's take a look at number 5 here. Okay. Um, Wong, the blah, 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 is a poet. Okay, notice I just went blah, 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 blah. Reading for the SAT is very different than reading for class. When you read for class, your teacher really wants you to understand everything, okay? And wants you to get key words and wants you to look out for details and things like that. Think of the SAT differently. The purpose of reading for the SAT is to get the points, okay? That's all we care about on the SAT is the points. So very different than school, okay? We just want to get the points. So that means that I don't need to analyze or even remember the titles or this other outside information. It may ask me to at some point, but for right now, I don't need it. So all I need to know is that Wong is a poet, an occupation which in Delaney's work is not blank. Okay, this occupation is not blank. I need to keep reading to find out what that means. Nearly a dozen of the characters that populate his novels are poets or writers. Okay, so it's not unusual if there's so many characters that are poets and writers. It's not unusual. I'm gonna go with that. Okay, so we look at our first one, infallible. I mean, may not know what that means. Let's keep going. Atypical, may not know what that means. Ludicrous, may not know what that means. Tedious, think I have an idea what tedious means. Tedious means that you're doing it over and over and you're tired of it, and that's not exactly what it's saying here. So we have to get rid of tedious. Now, atypical. Well, now we have to start breaking down these words. I'm looking at atypical because I see typical in here, and I know what typical means. Um, so atypical would be the opposite of typical, and I'm saying is not unusual. So I think this is going to be my answer here. Okay. And in fact, it is. All right. So there's a couple ways of getting to the answers always. And if you're stuck with 2 or 3 answers that you don't know the definitions of, then you really have to kind of break down and analyze some of the words and see if there's some roots that you know of that you know what they mean. Um, and something could happen, and this is important to understand. It could happen that you eliminate 3 answer choices and you're stuck with one and you don't know what that word means. Well, you still got to go for it. Okay. If you've eliminated 3 answer choices, that means that the one that's left has to be the correct answer. And sometimes we would rather go with the familiar because even though the familiar may have part of it that's wrong, but we understand it and we say, well, let's go with that. Well, don't do that. Train yourself to go with unfamiliar if you've been able to successfully eliminate 3 of the wrong answer choices. And remember, so in practice, what you want to try to do is eliminate 3 answer choices and find that the right and understand why the right one is right. When you're actually taking the test, it's a different strategy. When you're actually taking the test, it doesn't matter which one you do. It doesn't matter if you've isolated the correct one and you know it's right, or if you've been able to eliminate the other 3. It doesn't matter which one you do as long as you do one of those, because you might not have enough time to do both of those. Okay. Let's take a look at the last words in context one. Let's see. Let's go with number 7. So, in addition to being an accomplished psychologist himself, Francis Cecil Sumner was a blank, increasing the opportunity for Black students to study psychology. He was a blank helping to found the psychological department at Howard, historically black university. Okay, so he's for black students learning. Um, and so which one is that? Being for something? Well, supplement means you're helping out, you're giving some addition, so that's not it. Beneficiary, what does that mean? Not sure. Distraction. He's not a distraction. Um, so he's either proponent or beneficiary. Now, beneficiary, I can see the bene here, and I know that means something good. Now, does this mean he's giving something, or does that mean he's receiving something good? Not so sure. Proponent. Now, that kind of reminds me of the word opponent. Opponent means you're against something. Pro usually means for or good. So I'm going to say that proponent is my right answer here. I'm going to go with that. So this is how, even though you don't know all the answer choices, you can still work to eliminate and figure out what the right answer is. And so indeed, A is the correct answer. Okay. Let's head on down to number 20, I think. Yes. Okay, so here we have, and what when I teach my students, I have a mini lesson on punctuation, and it doesn't cover all kinds of punctuation, just the punctuation that's being tested on the SAT. So this is not a particularly difficult question, but I wanted to illustrate something here. So in her major series, blah, 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 painter, blah, 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 explored themes, blank. So she explored themes, blank, healing, self-discovery, memory. Okay, I don't need to read any further. I know the word is of. She explored themes of healing. Now, do I need some punctuation after it? Well, from the lesson I teach, what you would learn is that colons and dashes are basically used in the same way on the SAT. So, in other words, I've got two answers that mean pretty much the same thing. They can't both be right, so they have to both be wrong. All right, that leaves us with A and B. And if I'm looking at, do I put a comma after of? When would I put a comma after of? I could think of a situation, but I'm talking about of healing, so I don't think that's right. A is our answer. Okay. And by the way, I'm going through these really quickly. And what I actually do with my students is show them how to work a problem. Then we do a problem together, and then I have them do some problems and see how they're doing with that. But right now, I'm just kind of presenting, throwing this crash seminar at you very quickly. So the next one by this is what's called an inference one, which choice completes the text so that it conforms to conventions of standard English. Okay, so when you see this question, what that means is you're going to have 8 answer choices that all mean the same thing, or most of them mean mostly the same thing. Okay, so this one is a kind of a no-brainer, and let me show you why. I know I'm in the grammar section here, so I don't need to read these for meaning. What I need to do when I see a question that's exactly like this and it says this is that I need to figure out what the part in front of the comma is referring to by reducing the runoff flowing into city sewers. This is going to be the subject. Okay. So by reducing, so what is it that's reducing the running flow? Okay. I can go back and look and see that these people oversaw, or she oversaw, the installation of 164 bioswales. And then it describes what bioswales are. So I'm guessing that's what it is. I'm guessing my answer is bioswales. It's not the mitigation of something. Here, my answer is bioswales. Here is the bioswales mitigation. So A and C are practically the same answer. It's not both street flooding and resulting pollution. That's not the answer. Those aren't the two things. It's bioswales. So when I run into a question like this, it's really easy. I see comma and a blank, comma and a blank. I'm looking for the subject to be right there, right after that comma, not somewhere buried in the rest of the sentence, which, by the way, in a lot of reading and writing, you do see it done differently, but the SAT is very consistent about this, about putting the subject right after that. Now, their subject might have an antecedent in front, it might have an article like the or a, it might even have an adjective in front of it, but the subject has to be there. Okay. All right. So that's a little bit on reading. Don't think we have any more time for that. I wanted to get to some math questions too, really quickly, and show you some shortcuts in math. Like I said, a lot of this is about shortcuts. We do deal with the harder problems, but right now I'm going to show you some ways to get to the easy ones first. What percentage of 300 is 75? I start by reading the question, and that's all. The only thing there is the question here. There's no big prompt. And then I look at my answer choices and I see kind of a varied number of answers. I see 50%. And I say, what is 50% of 300? What is half of 300? Half of 300 is 150, which is more than 75. So my answer has to be less than 75. There it is. Okay. Now, it took longer to explain this than it actually does to do it. Because if we just do that process in your head, that you can't put in numbers in a calculator fast enough to meet that process. That is going to be something that this question takes you 5 seconds to do. Okay. Same thing with something like this. What is the solution to the given equation? Okay, I've got two two-digit numbers that I'm going to have to multiply times each other. So I'm going to end up with x squared. Well, not end up with, but I'm going to have x squared equals 36 times 25. Now, what does x squared mean? It means that I'm squaring x times x. Well, I've got two numbers here, basically, and I've got two numbers here. So my x, okay, has to be, since it's the same number, has to be something in between 25 and 36. The only answer that gives me that is B, 30. Again, actually doing this is quicker than putting this into your calculator. So another shortcut. Okay, here, word problems. Still read this first. Which equation represents the situation? Okay, I see equations with, okay, I see a certain type of equation here. I'm seeing some that are y equals mx plus b. I'm seeing this equation, which is a little weird. But I want to start writing as soon as I start reading the word problem. So 3 more than 8 times a number is equal to 83. That's what I'm looking for there. And here it is down on the bottom. Okay. Or I could have stopped as soon as I could notice that something equals 83. And so that gives me everything but B as my answer choice. And I could see that I've got 8 times the number X. So now I need to find 8X. There's that. Or I could see 3 more. So that means 3 plus, and I could see that down here on D too. So that's another little shortcut. Okay. The favorite formula on this test is y equals mx plus b. What is the best interpretation of 25 in this context? What context? Well, let me find the formula. That's my second step. If there's a formula, I'm going to find it second after I've read the question. And here it is. And it is definitely y equals mx plus b formula, except that the mx and the b are flipped around. Okay, so this is really b plus mx formula. All right, so if you study what y equals mxb means, then you'll know that m is a rate, or it's something that increases, or something that decreases. Okay. So let's see what we got. A, with each monthly deposit, the amount in Hannah's bank increased by $25. Okay, that sounds pretty good. With each deposit, it increased by 25. So that's a rate, deposit per $25. That's what that is. I like that one. Before Hannah made any monthly deposits, the amount in her bank was 25. Nope, 25 is your starting amount. That would be B. After one monthly deposit, the amount in Hannah's bank was account was 25. But that's her total after a month. That would be Y. And then Hannah made a total of 25 monthly deposits. A total of the deposits would be X. So it's important to learn what these are because you don't have to struggle and fight. And notice I didn't read any of this stuff. I went straight to the equation. I said, what is 25B or what is 25? 25 is the increased amount. Now, you're probably asking, Terry, how do I know that you don't need to read this stuff? Because that's the way the SAT made it. Plain and simple. There's no better explanation. Your math teacher might not give you a question like that, but the SAT does. And that's all you need to know. Okay, let's look at number 8 real quick. Which equation defines f of x? And we have y, all of these are y equals mx plus b. Okay, again. So I notice here that I have 3 different y-intercepts, and I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 different slopes. So if I figure out the slope, I've got my answer. I don't need to rewrite the whole equation, just the slope. So the difference, 32 minus 29 is 3. 1 minus 0 is 1. 3 over 1 is the slope. So 3 is my slope. Another quick thing to do is seeing this, I say, oh, 0 is my x value. So 0 is your x value. That means that this is going to be your y-intercept. And so 29 is going to be the y-intercept. So my answer could be A, it could be C, doing it that way. And that's a quick way of eliminating a couple answer choices too. Okay. So let's see if there's one more I wanted to maybe go over. Yeah, let's do this one too. The scatter plot. Okay, something that basically all this means is that you draw a line of kind of best fit through here, and it kind of looks like that, kind of. And what it's asking for is the equation, the correct equation. Well, 2 things. I know that my y-intercept is going to be somewhere here between 9 and 10. So I look for a 9 and 10 as my B. And I see C and D are possibilities. And my line is going down, so that means my slope is going down. So that means my slope is negative, and my answer is D. Okay, so these are just very, very, very fast ways of getting this stuff done. Okay, hopefully that was helpful. And before we get into Q&A, I want to talk a little bit about the program, about what I do. And about some of the bonuses that we got for you guys here. So I do teach a class, an SAT class. I've got one that is starting on Tuesday. I've got one that is starting a little bit later on. And what I usually do, the class, well, let me actually pull up the PowerPoint one more time for you. Okay, and see if I can skip all the way to that slide. I don't know if it lets me do that. No, I just have to go through them like this. Okay, so and I forgot to say take notes. Hopefully you guys were taking some notes there. And you might want to take notes on this part. So I have a package that I'm presenting tonight. I'd love for you guys to take a look at. There's an 18-hour course with me, the SAT Guru. It's usually $6.99, but tonight you get an hour video added to that, which is usually a $49.99. And this whole video talks about y equals mx plus b, and all the different ways it can be used on the SAT, and just ways of getting things quickly. The next video for an hour, it's writing the perfect college essay. because for a lot of colleges, this is the thing that puts people over the top. Okay, and gets them into the university. Then you also get the College Board's digital SAT book. This book I was talking about a while ago on my shelf back there, and a 30-minute one-on-one SAT session. So this course, which is going to be six sessions, 3 hours each. I've got another course if it's more convenient to you. There's 8 sessions, 2.5 hours each. The courses are small. I got small numbers. I don't have these huge courses. I like to keep it small so it's more intimate. Kids can ask questions. Breakout rooms, so I work with kids individually or in small groups depending on their needs and things like that, so I can differentiate. Other thing about this course that makes it different than other SAT courses is that I have a regular report once a week with parents and students. So accountability is a huge thing for me, which no other course I know does that. Okay. So I care about your kids. I want them to do well. And so when I'm working with them and they're not doing their homework or they're not, answering questions in class or messing around, something like that, or they're late every time, I want the parents to know about that. And I want the kid to be aware about it too. So I'll be talking to you about that. And every kid gets their own individualized plan. Like some students are going for 1500s, some students are going for 1200s. So that's a different plan. The fundamentals are the same, but what I have you do sometimes in class or after class is going to be different. And of course, your schedules, are part of that decision too. I mean, if you've only got 3 hours a week to work on the SAT besides class, that's it. That's fine. If you've got 10 or 15 hours, then we plan homework accordingly. Okay. So, but in addition to that, you'll get a 30-minute session where we can go over anything that's on the SAT that's bothering you. So all of that together would normally be 933. Tonight you can get it for $499. And actually, if you register in the next hour, you can get it for should be before 11:30. No, I'm sorry, before midnight Eastern Standard Time. You can get it for $399. I'll knock $399 off the price. And I've just sent you a video. I mean, sorry, just sent you an email that has the links for the courses in there. So you can go ahead and look at that and sign up. For those of you who think that you need a little more practice or you're just wanting to get a super high score, one thing I would add to that is 10 90-minute sessions, one-on-one. So this is private tutoring, which would usually be $22.50. Okay, and so that whole package would normally be $31.83. You can get it tonight for $19.95, or like I said, if you get it before the deadline, you can get that for $17.95. And also, if there's something in between those packages that you think we'd be more comfortable with, that is also in the email that I sent you. There's another package there, and also I can break it up into payment if that's more convenient or easier for you to do a payment plan. So just wanted to let you know on that. And in that email, there's also that link to the 20-minute consultation. So you can fill that out too. So now I'm going to open it up to questions, and this could be anything about either the programs or the SAT itself, or anything related to the SAT. So go ahead and shoot your comments in the chat, or if you feel like, or if you'd rather just speak out, you can do that. Okay, someone asks, what has been your success rate with the digital SAT? Okay, so the digital SAT just started in the United States. It's been working overseas for about a year. So I have my first students taking the actual digital SAT in about 3 weeks, but I've seen some major differences, major jumps in scores, especially the ones I'm tutoring privately. One of my students has had a 200-point jump in his math score, which that's really good. And his English score has been not comparable, not quite that great. The English score has been more like closer to 100 points, so almost a 300-point jump in just a few months of tutoring. And he did not go through the course. So the advantage of going through the course is that you get all those fundamentals from the course, and then you can do private tutoring after that. And by the way, I know most private tutors are 60 minutes, and that is usually when I'm doing subject work for other classes, that's what I do. But with the SAT, I just it's so difficult to try to assess a student and the student's progress over the week, and then see that they're working on the same thing and see they're doing the things right that they're supposed to, and teach them new stuff in 90 minutes, in less than 90 minutes. So that's why I like the 90 minutes.